What's up, traders? Today I want to go over when I'm talking about type 1, type 2, or type 3 entries. I want to kind of go over what that is. I've heard this. I've heard a few people talk about this. I don't know if theirs is the same, but how I was taught and what I refer to as is what I'm going to go over. So we'll just zoom in. I'll just show you on this one. We're on Microsoft. So anyway, I have a zone. Again, if you saw my other video on price action, that's what I base a lot of my trades on. 90% of them, 99% are price action. And I have just did a whole video about that. But I draw these zones out, right? You see this blue line and this green line. So those are turnaround spots usually. So if we're focusing on just these lines. So let's say you got your candle starting right here, and it plays out like this. It comes down, turns around, comes back up. So I wonder if I can even draw that. Let me just see if I can. So say it comes to here, turns around, and goes back up. That's what you want the trade to do. You see it coming down. You've identified this as a great buy-in zone. You want to ride it out. Typically, with that, with the trade like that, you would have your stop loss right here. You want to give it some wiggle room, but you'd have your stop loss down a little bit. Just like I said. Well, it depends on if you want type 1, type 2, or type 3. So, without getting into that, let's bring this down here. Alright, so this makes sense now. So a type 1 trade. When I say type 1, give me 1 second. Where's my triangle or rectangle? There we go. Type 1, type 2 entry, and type 3. So again, you don't see any of this stuff. You've identified your zone. Type 1, you'll enter here. You'll enter here assuming or knowing or just prepared for it to come all the way down here and turn around. You're not worried because your stop loss is right here. So you're good. Like I said, you're just not worried. This order fills the fastest. There is some downsides to it. Let's say the price comes below this and stops out. You have taken the max loss for that whole trade as opposed to entering here and taking a much smaller loss. I really base all mine on, it depends on the trade, depends on the volatility, how I feel about the zone, how many times was that zone validated, and just market volatility and volume. It depends on, again, it's a huge difference. I say it all the time, charts are charts, but not every trade's the same, and Forex is very different from stocks. So I do all three of these. It just depends on how I feel about that trade and how confident I am it's going to bounce in that zone. So as you can tell, or guess, this is type 2. You wait for it to hit your zone. You're watching it. You know you're going to enter here. You've set up your whole bracket. Enter here, stop loss here, your take profits up here somewhere. So you could probably guess what the downside to this one is what happens when you have it all right here. Or you have your whole entry right here. It hits this zone and turns around. You just lost out on a perfectly good trade. You've identified everything just right, but you were just, I don't want to be bad, you were just a little too stingy. You went a little too low, and that cost you a perfectly good trade. So there's pros and cons with all of them. This type 1 here, it already closed, or entered it, the whole order filled. He's off, he's in the profit, while you're just congratulating him on a good trade. So type 3 also has its issues, because if you're doing a market order, by the time you're getting it on the way out, okay, it's entered here again, it looks like the momentum's going, you're gonna have your order fill here. If it's a market order, it might fill kind of somewhat up here. Let's see if I can't. Really? There we go. By the time your order fills, you might be at an average price right up there. So another advantage to type 1 is it's filled the fastest. You might lose the most, but your whole order's filled, you got a great price. Type 3, you've waited for that confirmation. You have now given up some of your margin. So again, but it's not really that bad. It's a safe one. It's a confirmation trade. You've already confirmed your whole zone. You've confirmed your whole trade is right, and you're going to ride that train out the rest of the way. You've given up margin. It is the safest one, but it offers out all these the least amount of profit, because you've left some meat on the bones there. So type 1 definitely more aggressive. Type 2, that's if it's going to hit that or not. And then type 3, you've given some meat on the bones, but you will see a lot of profitable traders just do type 3. They're not worried about. They're not trying to go from $1 to 100. They don't care if they go from 10 to 90. They've left out the 1 to 10, the 90 to 100, if you guys can understand that. But they've solidly made the 10 to 90. They're in and out in very confident time frames. So I'll try to find some examples for you guys and get rid of these. What do we drew in these lines, right? Okay, so I wanted to get this. So, perfect example right here. This is a zone I actually have picked out for Microsoft. So let's, if it didn't gap down, we're on 15 minutes. So never mind, it wouldn't have gapped. Let's say this was your zone. You got in here, type 1. You had your stop loss here because this is your turnaround zone. It broke it. Now it didn't hold. It was just a false breakout, but you would have stopped out. So you would have taken a loss from this green line to your stop loss. You would have taken the max loss if this was a type 1. Type 2, you would have entered in at this blue line, stopped out here. Would have been minimal. Type 3, you would have had the option to fill or not to fill. You would have said, okay, it broke through it. Is the trade still validated, or do I need to rethink some things? But it broke through, it pushed up, and it went again. So type 3 would have been a safe one here. You would have entered, it would have pulled back a little bit. You probably would have been guessing yourself, but if your stop loss at the same spot, still wouldn't have tagged it. You would have played that as a false breakout. Stop loss would have been the same. Type 3 entered right here, came down here, which is just fine, and then shot up. You could have taken your profit here. You could have, wherever your next zone is, that's where you'd have taken profit. So as you can see, just from this example alone, type 3 is the safest one. Type 1 will get you in every trade. Actually, right next to it. If you were trading just this right here, if you're watching just that, if you had type 2, you wouldn't have entered. It would have came down. Your type 2 entry would have been right here. Right here on this zone. And it wouldn't have filled. So, everyone that entered type 1 right here would have got in, would have been fine. Type 2, you'd have said, man, I was just too close. Type 3 would have made money. You'd have been the only one that didn't make money that day. So while they all have their ups and downs, that's why every trade's different. With volatility, I haven't traded Microsoft, so I'm not sure what I would have done on this one. But so as you can see, so hopefully that clarifies things up when I'm talking about in future videos. If I did a type 1, type 2, or type 3 entry, what I'm talking about here. I refer to it often. If it's something if it's a trade I'm looking at, my confidence in that trade will tell you which one I'm doing. If I'm good about it, I'm type 1. Get my order filled. Let's go. If I'm not so confident, I'll manage it live. I'll probably do more of a type 2. If it's a crazy stock, or I'm just not so sure about it, type 3. Type 3s are safe. If I'm doing stocks, a lot of my stocks are type 3. I got in Tesla the other day. Definitely type 1. Stopped out twice on my third entry. because it just hammered through the first two support and resistance levels. On the third one, I got in and out and made a profit, made it all back, but I did take 2 losses. So type 3 is safe. Had I waited for type 3 on Tesla, I wouldn't have taken those 2 losses. My third trade, I would have gotten in. I would have made some money. So that play that day would have been great. But like I said, most of the time my stock trades are type 3. Forex, I'm usually a type 1 or type 2. So I previously did a video on stop losses, and I mentioned adding on to my trade. Oh, that might have been my stop loss video. Or adding onto your position. So I talked about, and something I regularly talk about is don't add to a losing trade. If it's still in my zone, that's when I do it. So if we were actually looking, let me just touch base on that real quick, because I said I'd do it in a very specific way. Okay, so when I say never add to a losing trade, I usually never do unless it's in this zone. Then I'll do a type 1 and a type 2. That's what I'm doing. So type 1 I would have entered here, and then down here, if it touches down here, it's breaking that zone. My stop loss is still right below it. Here I would have lost more. So just forgetting those candles are there. If we were just focusing here, just to make it a little bit clearer for everybody, just right here, enter here, type 1. This is mostly Forex. I never do this in stocks. So you enter here, type 1. You know this is your zone. It's at the end of that zone. Stop loss here. You've taken a loss if it's a pretty big zone. I add on. This is where I double down, triple down, right here, because you're in recovery zone. I had a whole video on just about this, but that's the one time I will add to a trade, is if I entered type 1 and it's still in that same zone, and I can add to my position as a type 2. I just don't want anybody thinking I'm just gambling it away, adding on. So while we're on the subject of type 1 and type 2, if I enter type 1 again and it goes to that bottom, I'll add on there, but my stop loss stays the same. So I didn't ride the giant loss the whole way down. I just added to my position at an even cheaper price. So thanks for watching. Don't forget to like the video if you did. Comment down below if you have any questions. Email me. My link will be in the description. Don't forget to subscribe. And again, let's lock in profits, not losses.